Good evening, friends. This side Rahul Magan here is a Group Chief Executive Officer, Treasury Consulting, and also a venture capitalist. Standing today, which is 10th September 2019, we're going to be shooting a very important video about a development which is happening in the world of international banks. Well, India is busy in their own issues. Example, the Yes Bank issue. Now the Rana Kapoor is the latest news suggests that the Rana Kapoor is selling all his stake worth 2,000 crore to the Paytm owner Vijay Shekhar Sharma, and if Vijay Shekhar Sharma will buy this, then not a single rupee of 2,000 crore is from Vijay Shekhar Sharma, it is by the SoftBank. This is known as punting over punting, but we will have a separate video on this very soon. We're going to talk about a very important issue which is happening in the international bank, and specifically banks like Goldman, JP Morgan, Standard Chartered. Well, on the other side, the banks like Citi, HSBC. I'm not saying Deutsche because Deutsche is actually on the verge of a very big restructuring. There are multiple reports which are coming from from Deutsche, actually insider reports. But trusting this report is very, very difficult because 10 mouths are giving 15 different information. Who is giving the right information, we do not know. But the public information about the Deutsche is said that they are firing around 18,000 people, while the ground reality is that it is over 35,000 plus people. And now the untouched unit, which is ubiquitous. In English, the meaning of the ubiquitous means it is everywhere. So the untouched unit of Deutsche, which is the fixed income trading, is also under radar, and people being asked in the fixed income trading to leave. And although I'm not confirming, but few of my very good friends in the Deutsche does suggest that they're being asked to leave without severance pay. So apart from Deutsche, all the top banks of the globe like Goldman, JP, Standard Chartered, Citi, Barclays, HSBC, UBS, Credit Suisse, everyone. And when it comes to Singapore, you have DBS, UOB, OCBC, and the Singaporean units of all these big boys. They all are busy, and that is nothing but XVA, which is valuation adjustment. Now, as we know that there are 7 valuation adjustments which we have, and one of them is CVA, which is credit valuation adjustment. One of them is DVA, debit valuation adjustment. One is MVA, margin valuation adjustment. You call it lucky, you don't call it lucky, you call this as a deferment of a storm, you call this as a deferment of a tsunami, I don't know. But the delay of initial margin model to 2022, whatever limited information we have on the Google, is going to hit MVA very hard. Banks who spend a considerable amount of money assuming that that initial margin model and the standardized initial margin model by ISDA, International Stocks and Derivative Association, will come into picture, but unfortunately it is not. So the money which has been spent is, I call this is a waste, because when initial margin model will come into picture 2022, and God knows if it comes in 2022, then I don't know whatever the bank have prepared till now, whether how much they can use out of it, I don't know. I have no, I do not have any other, I cannot say about that. Then we have FVA, funding valuation adjustment. Then we have LVA, liquidity valuation adjustment. Then we have COLVA, collateralized valuation adjustment. The total are 7. And the total 7 is known as X. In foreign exchange, I have said in different videos number of times that X means count. There are many intelligent people in the world of foreign exchange, and 90% of these intelligent people are in one country. You know the name of that country. They say XVA is also a valuation adjustment. No sir, X stands for count. So the total count is 7. There are many international banks who say that now the count has grew to 13, but at the same time they are also saying that the difference, the delta of 5, which is 8 plus 5 equal to 13, the 5 belongs to them. So this is personalized or localized version of XVA. Henceforth, the 5 are not coming in the public domain. As of now, they are not coming in the public domain. Well, I have studied a lot about XVA, and I'm very pleased to share that we're going to be launching very good about XVA soon. There are multiple videos on the XVA that are coming into public domain from our side. So this is the first part of that series which we are launching. And after that, we would be talking about a very significant topic which is getting heatedly discussed on the social media and also in the US from East Coast to West Coast, which is about Managed Service Platform, which is MPS. I know if you Google this word, Managed Service Platform, it is difficult to get an answer out of it because currently it's being discussed. There is no concrete architecture we have in the public domain, just like fundamental review of the trading book. Fundamental review of trading book, complete architecture is not in the public domain. We all know it about. Henceforth, when we going to talk about managed service platform or managed platform services, we going to share our version, like we are going to be sharing the version of virtual banking. So in the next 7 to 8 days, I assure you very good and interesting videos are on the cards, because now we have crossed 800 target and we are moving towards 1000. So in the next 200 videos, we're going to be imparting a lot of different topics like information technology and all. Coming back to the topic, I have collated various points on XVA, which is valuation adjustment, and I am going to be giving 2 to 3 minutes to every point. So the total point I have is approximately 12. So it's going to be roughly 40 odd minutes video we are going to be discussing in that regards. Number one is that the biggest, now these are all the issues. Now, okay, let me clarify that. According to me, according to the understanding of the treasury consulting, who is pretty competent in the foreign exchange market and you know it about, these all would be the issues sooner or later for banks when we talk about the XVAs. Of course, the big boys like Goldman, JP, Standard Chartered, they know how to mitigate these issues. On the contrary, the smaller bank like Santander and the struggling banks like Deutsche, it would be very difficult for them to have that. While at the same point of time, fraud or no fraud, GST or no GST, recession or no recession, Indian banks cannot escape from XVAs, because we also need to understand that Indian banks do not have their own interbank limits. So if today ICICI, Yes, Axis and all other banks, such private and public sector banks, are taking up positions of foreign exchange. So let me give an example of Cognizant. If Cognizant, which is an American ITES company, who is taking up a position from ICICI Bank, assuming, and this ICICI Bank is able to give a position only because they have an interbank limit from a foreign bank. Now that foreign bank could be anyone. It could be Goldman, it could be JP, it could be Standard Chartered, it could be Barclays or any foreign bank. Now when these foreign banks are complied with XVAs, which is valuation adjustment, they will push their interbank partners to comply with XVA. So it is just like a cricket game. When the first batsman, who is an opening batsman, he got not out, right, while the rest another got out at a regular interval. So once the 10th wicket fall out, and assuming that this person is still batting, he has to go, because the cricket rule is said that cricket rule is at any given point of time 2 batsmen have to work together. So if the 10 batsmen out, one is not, single batting is not allowed in the cricket anymore. Similarly, once the international bank and the G7 banks will be compliant to XVA, they will push their interbank partner to compliant for the XVA. Henceforth, GST or no GST, recession or no recession, Indian bank needs to be very careful about XVAs, as it is going to hit their books pretty hard. It's not hard, I think more than hard. And more importantly, the question is not about Indian bank. The question is about the all another banks of the weakest countries like Venezuela, like Brazil, just like Russia. Although Russia is not the weakest country, but their banking system is not as strong as we have US and Singaporean banking system. Just like Argentina, the weakest country's banking system is going to hit pretty hard sooner or later. But as again the big boys, Goldman, JP, Standard Chartered and respective, they are taking lead. And as usual, they are acting as a torch bearer. They are showing the way how to move further. Of course, mistakes would happen. Whenever you do something new, you don't know, mistakes would happen, and banks will basically try and resolve the mistake as early as possible by using their bandwidth, muscle and IT power. It's a pretty interesting time which is coming for the banking, at least 4 years down the line. So the next 4 or 5 years, it would be very interesting for the banking, and the total amount of jobs in the banking would go actually would be higher than the would come, but the pay scale of the job that would come in the next 4 years would be much higher than what the pay scale the people are drawing today. Of course, the level of skill set, the level of quality, the level of education the bank required right now in their employees is more or less missing in even the MBA institutions as well. So, to conclude the discussion, these all are the summary points which I have made, and these summary points are, according to me, are the issues that are going to get XVA, that are going to hit XVA hard. Number one, the cost to be passed to counterparties. Well, from a banking parlance, there are two counterparties. One is the interbank and one is the corporate. So, for example, you are taking up a position from JP Morgan, who holds approximately $42 odd trillion of balance sheet, basically the derivative. And JP Morgan is giving you the lines because JP Morgan is funded by HSBC. If JP Morgan, and assuming the party in the counterparty, the corporate in this is the ExxonMobil, the largest petrochemical company. So the ExxonMobil is taking any dollar denominated petroleum trade, which is a commodity trade with JP Morgan Chase, say London desk. And that desk is giving a position because HSBC, which is also a British bank, also basically a kind of European bank, they will give the funding lines to JP Morgan Chase. Now, if JP Morgan is charging XVA from basically the ExxonMobil, then JP Morgan will pass this to HSBC. But if HSBC is not charging, then HSBC has to be insane. Ultimately, the cost which they are charging from the customer has to pass to the counterparty. That counterparty would be both. One is the corporate. The Chase has to pass this cost to corporate, which is ExxonMobil, and also they have to pass this cost to the interbank party, which is HSBC. HSBC will pass this trade to Standard Chartered to Barclays to Goldman, and this cycle will continue. So everybody has to pass their share of XVA to the another party. So this is just like one party transferring this to another, and this is how the foreign exchange work will go. But the problem here is that currently the regulators worldwide, if I take the top regulators like Monetary Authority of Singapore, Federal Reserve, European Central Bank, Bank of Japan, Bank of England, and multiple, majority of the regulators worldwide, they are not sure that how the cost has to be passed and how the cost has to be recorded in the books. The worst is happening is that the two accounting pillars of the globe, which is Financial Accounting Standard Board, which is a custodian of IFRS, while International Accounting Standard Board, which is a custodian of US GAAP, both are pretty silent. Technically speaking, Financial Accounting Standard Board and International Accounting Standard Board, IFRS, US GAAP respectively, they are actually, according to me, silent from the last 2-3 years. If you take my opinion, my feedback, that they have not delivered anything great in the last 2 to 3 years, and God willing, then when they would be delivering anything great. We need to wait and watch. So cost is surely be an issue. Another important issue which we are having is the computation, because it's just like assuming there is some seminar which is going on, and in this seminar you have 20 banks who are participating, and you are asking the 20 banks that how the cost has to be shared. Basically first computed and then passed. All 20 banks would have difference of opinion. Since they would have difference of opinions, the forums like ABS, Association of Banks for Singapore. So in Singapore we have a forum which is ABS, Association of Banks for Singapore. Similarly, we have multiple forums. Now since we have multiple forums, these forums have to sit together and conclude. But once again, it is not easy. It is definitely not easy. Then we have risk adjusted pricing. Now, risk-adjusted pricing is a new term that is coming into the banking domain nowadays, because there is no concrete formula of risk-adjusted pricing. Now, the ultimate formula is that in case of an importer, like ExxonMobil is predominantly an importer who is a oil party, while Cognizant is an exporter, it's a software party. ExxonMobil, for risk-adjusted, basically risk-adjusted pricing for ExxonMobil would be price plus XVA, while for Cognizant, which is a software and exporter party, which is price minus XVA. But at the same point of time, the ability to compute the real-time XVAs, the agreement the ISDA agreements which has not been updated. Well, you would be surprised to know that CME, which is Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and everyone know about CME. CME is currently far ahead as far as the implementation of SOFR is concerned, which is secured overnight financing rate, which is by an alternative provided by the alternate rate reference committee. And at the same point of time, CME is launching SOFR options. So, and they have put it in the public domain that 6th January 2020, which is practically I think 5-6 months from here, they would be launching the SOFR option. And with this, CME, Chicago Mercantile Exchange, once again would be the world's first platform who would have SOFR option. So technically speaking, when we're talking about the risk adjusted pricing, then few platforms are far ahead, like CME. While with due respect, few platforms like LCH, London Clearing House, Singapore Stock Exchange, SGX, and there are multiple, Hong Kong Clearing, they are, I'm not saying laggard, but they are not as far as we have CME. So risk adjusted pricing has to be resolved, but having said that, not easy. The CCPs, the central clearing counterparty, have to come into the picture and they need to resolve that issue, but God knows. Then different banks are having different requirements of XVAs. That is the most difficult problem which I envisage for XVA. So example, there is a flight which is moving from Singapore to London for a minute, and there are 3 passengers sitting on that flight, apart from 2 pilots and 1 cabin crew. So I repeat, there is a flight of British Airways or maybe Singapore Airlines which is moving. Singapore Airlines is flying from Singapore to London, and there are 3 passengers which are in that flight, apart from 2 pilots and 1 crew member, right? The first passenger is like me, who is saying, I will go by economy class because my objective is to reach to London. That's it. It's not that I cannot afford business class, but I need to save the money for my company. If I can have a good leg space, I will do have an economy class. I'll take a window seat, sleep, and I'll come to London. While the second person is saying, no, I will go to the premier economy. I will not go in the economy, I will go in the premier economy. The reason, I need a good food, I need a good care. While the third person, who is the HNI, high net worth individual, he wanted to go in the first class. Reason, he wanted to have almost all luxuries we have worldwide. He wanted to have a continental food. Similarly, when it comes to XVAs, valuation adjustment, I have divided this into 3 parts. Singaporean banks, they looking forward for CVA and DVA, credit valuation adjustment and debit valuation adjustment, which I term this as a basic economy class ticket. So they wanted to fly from Singapore to London in a basic economy class, because sitting today, CVA and DVA are considered as a plain vanilla XVAs. When it comes to the European banks, they are looking forward for MVA, which is margin valuation adjustment, as European banks take lots of exchange traded positions than OTC, while Singaporean banks and US banks on the other side of the game, they take a lot of OTC position than exchange trading position. So they are the European bank who looking forward MVA, they are just like a person of the premier economy, while US bank is looking for FVA, funding valuation adjustment, and KVA, capital valuation adjustment, as they, like JP Morgan, $43 trillion of derivative book. Goldman Sachs, once again, $42 trillion. If you add the top 10 banks, they would not be less than $120 trillion of the derivative book only in the US. Henceforth, for them, FVA and KVA are the most important, which is funding valuation adjustment and the capital valuation adjustment. So if I take 7 XVAs, out of these 7 XVAs, Singaporean banks are CVA and DVA focused, while European banks are MVA focused, while US banks are FVA and KVA focused. It's just like not all the banks have the same appetite, and that is the reason, that would be one reason why no uniformity on the pricing of the XVA would happen. Apart from that, Reuters and Bloomberg are also, I would say, they are not in a position to offer that anything as of now, because the problem is very complicated and banks are not in a situation to resolve that problem as well. Point number 4, collateralized valuation adjustment. I'll speak a little bit about this because Basel 3 revised, to whom many people call this as Basel 4. Basel 3 revised is talking a lot about collateral apportionment. Although the draft of the Basel 3 revised is of 1868, which is practically 1870 pages, and one by one I am reading this draft, right? Since one by one I am reading this draft, henceforth, once I come to the collateral apportionment, I am surely going to be raising that issue, but collateral apportionment would be an issue because we are discussing XVA, because it's going to get live from October 2023, when in my parlance Basel 3 revised and in somebody else's parlance Basel 4 would come into the picture. The 5th is the illiquid credit spread. No bank, either it's Goldman, JP, Standard Chartered, UBS, Barclays and all, you name whatever, no bank can run away from the fact that they do not have a illiquid credit spread in the books. While if you look at the annual report of the Goldman, JP and all, they have taken a huge positions in the illiquid credits. Now, how are we going to settling the illiquid credit spreads and how CBA would be working in that direction, we don't know. But this would be seriously like if I compare DBS Singapore, which is predominantly a bank owned by government of Singapore, while if I compare Goldman, which is not owned by government of US but more or less too big to fail, and JP Morgan Chase, while they have an extensive position in the illiquid credit spread compared to DBS Singapore. So for DBS Singapore, illiquid credit spread is definitely not a point of concern. For Goldman, it is. It definitely is. Then we have data sharing is an issue in the XVA. I would like to give an example of Singapore in that regards. It is said that Singaporean banking system is one of the safest banking system we have in the world. Well, I tend to agree with that, at least 99%, but after reading the book on the 1MDB scandal, I have little reluctance as far as the role of MAS in 1MDB is concerned, but that is another part of the story. Why Singapore is considered as one of the safest banking system in the globe? Because one bank share an information with another bank. So take an example of Mr. John, just a dummy example, it's a dummy example. Basically in case we have in case it matches with the realistic example, it's just a coincidence. Assuming we have a John who took a credit card from OCBC, and for a minute assume that OCBC sanctioned a line worth 1.3 million Sing dollars on that credit card for a minute, because Mr. John is working as the Vice President Goldman Sachs. Now Mr. John spends $1.3 million whole 100% on the different buying, cruise, air tickets, shopping for wife, girlfriends and all everything. And then all of a sudden Goldman came to them and said that no, we don't require your services, you please leave. Now what? Now from where John will pay $1.3 million? At a periodic interval, OCBC will share the information of all such defaulters and all requisite information with the another Singaporean banks. And in that regards, Monetary Authority of Singapore will act as a catalyst, which is a central bank, which is a good thing in Singapore, I have to say that. Now if Mr. John will go to DBS and say that I need $1 billion credit card from DBS, if he is having back of his mind that let me take the money from the DBS and then pay to OCBC and then I'll see how I can pay to DBS, or maybe I ran away from Singapore, he will not get a card from DBS because OCBC has already shared the data with the DBS. That is why Singaporean banking system is considered as the safest banking system, because the bank share information with another bank practically on a real-time basis and not at the delayed basis. While when it comes to XVA, there are, if we talk about 8 asset classes, which is FX, MM, FI, now crypto is also an asset class, which is your commodities, petroleum, gases and multiple energy and all. If we talk about these asset classes, then sharing of a real-time data with the regulator and regulator share the data with another bank is a humongous job. That requires an extensive capability and the reporting framework to be set up by the regulator and has to be approved by the banks. and both looks pretty easy and easier said done. Because even for a good regulators like Monetary Authority of Singapore, creating that framework and giving to bank and getting their approval and in turn sending this to the another bank is a very humongous chart. Even MS 610, which is Monetary Authority of Singapore 610, risk aggregation and statistics reporting, is pretty difficult for them to get it approved, and in fact there are several inconsistencies which we have in MS 610. We are anyways consulting to MS in that regards. Then the biggest issue is the big data computing is required, and I would like to take an example of a treasury management system like so there are banks who do not have a treasury management system like Murex and Calypso. Reason? It's pretty expensive. Not every bank can afford. So what they do, they develop their proprietary applications, the small time proprietary application. But what's the problem? The problem is same here as well in XVA. Even if we got the data for a minute, let's forget regulator. The top banks, Goldman, Citi, Standard Chartered, JP Morgan, UBS. The five signed an agreement wherein they decided to share data with each other, because they all are interbank partners to each other in one or another kind of asset class. We need a humongous analytics capability to get this done on a real-time basis. And analytics capability is one, hardware capability is one. The more important is the computational skill and able to get the data done. And that's not easy. That's not easy. Setting up that facility even for JP Morgan Chase or Goldman is not easy, because things are changing at a pretty faster pace. Big data computing is needed in XVA, but the problem will get worse or worsen if we talk about the smaller banks. They cannot afford big data computing. They cannot afford extensive hardware. They cannot afford extensive software, extensive IT teams, very expensive CIOs, chief information officers, maybe CTOs, maybe God knows what. It's pretty difficult. Then the frequent changes in the regulatory and inconsistency make the life worst. Fundamental review of the trading book supposed to hit 1st January 2019. Standing today, it is 10th September 2019. It's almost 8 months being done. But I have myself noticed that fundamental review of the trading book, 2 drafts came into the public domain in the last 8 months. And according to the limited information we have on the Google, although the confirmation is difficult, but the fundamental review of the trading book will get live on 1st January 2022. But in the last 8 months, you got 2 drafts. So 20 is pending, 21 is pending. In 2 years, you will got at least 2 drafts each. So 2 of 19, then 2 plus 2, 4, total 6. If today I will create an app or an application or a RegTech application to compute fundamental review of the trading book, and all of a sudden, like if somebody asks me to compute CVA, credit valuation adjustment as per fundamental review of the trading book, I create an app, RegTech app, all of a sudden a draft came, the formulation changes, it's a recurring cost to the bank. And bank himself do not know whether the changes which we are doing, they will basically continue to be when the it would be practically live or not. Bank do not know. Bank practically do not know. So it's a recurring cost, and it's a pinch to the bank, because we need to understand that banking is not what it is now. It is no more a profitable business. It's more or less a commodity business. That we need to appreciate that. Then we have very important thing which is coming in the public domain, which is that the managed service programs. In a managed service programs, which is also known as outsourcing in derivatives, for every bank computing XVA, having big data unit, hiring so many people, quants, IT people, big data experts and everyone, it's a pretty humongous job. The public domain figure suggests that JP Morgan Chase is spending roughly $10.8 billion in 2018 on the IT infrastructure. So for a bank like JP Morgan Chase spending $10.8 billion on the IT infrastructure, this is nothing. For Goldman it is nothing, for Citi it is nothing, but not for all. For HSBC, Barclays, ANZ, Westpac, National Australian Bank and all, it's going to hit at least it's going to pinch them, right? Now managed service programs are nothing but when somebody came up, like us, came up, and they will provide the platform wherein the real-time CVA, DVA, MVA, and all different type of XVA's computation is possible. However, having said that, this is not an easy job. Number one, you require a big data capability. Number two, a frequent changes in the regulatory is going to hit us. Number three, every bank have a different set of derivative. Somebody deals forward, somebody forward extra, somebody options, somebody non-deliverable, somebody swaps. So computation of the CVA and DVA covering all standards are pretty all type of derivative instruments are pretty difficult, and that too on a real-time basis. But at the same point of time, managed service program would be a reality soon. And of course, God willing, Treasury Consulting would surely love to participate in that regards. Another biggest issue is that which model of XVA you're going to be using. Are you going to be using single product model, multi-product model, or the hybrid model? I repeat, single product model, multi-product model, or the hybrid model. I'm just elaborating point little bit because we're going to have a dedicated video in that regards. And all these three, which is single product model, multi-product model, and the hybrid model, will further divided into two parts each, which is centralized model and decentralized model. So total 3 into 2, 6 parts. And this is the most challenging thing banks needs to accept out of these 6 combination, which one they want. And trust me, this is 6 I am saying. But number of bank does suggest that since their XVAs are over 13 in lot of cases, and these 13 are nothing but they are not in the public domain, these are dedicated only to the banks, right? Finding these 6, deciding which one to go in the 6 is very difficult for the banks. It's next to impossible job, and they need to get this done. Last but not the least, the real-time XVA pricing is always very difficult. And very important thing is that treasury management system, which is Murex as well as Calypso, they are not ready for that. I ready to challenge both Murex as well as Calypso in case they can prove that they are ready for that. XVA is the future. The banks have started creating a department which is counterparty risk portfolio management desk. We already had 2 videos about this topic, and more videos would be on the card. Now banks are planning to have, which is managed service programs. I don't know till what extent it would be profitable and reachable, and it would optimize the solution, but only time will tell. But everything will end up linked with 2 things. One is the treasury management system, and one is the feeder, which is Reuters and Bloomberg. Well, both Reuters and Bloomberg, according to me, are not ready, while the treasury management system, Murex as well as Calypso, is also not ready. So, in nutshell, XVA is a pretty humongous challenge for the banks. The big boys, those who are spending several $billion in a year on a technological framework, may be able to resolve, but till what extent we don't know. And having said that, at the same point of time, even if all these critical issues can be resolved in XVAs, then till what extent the system would be functioning, and till what extent that system, if developed for a minute, would be accepted in the interbank market, that is another challenge. So the list of the challenges goes one by one. But my last thing, having said that, these challenges will bring an opportunity for the people, because somebody rightly pointed, as the things get tougher, a tougher guy perform in a relatively better way. As things get tough, the tougher perform better. While if the things get easy, for tougher people it is nothing. I think it's a great opportunity, because counterparty risk portfolio management desk, now managed service programs, XVAs, 2022 fundamental review of the trading book, 2022 SFTR, 2022 managed analytics, now 2022 initial margin model. There is a hell lot of action which is happening in the banking, but we need to be aware, we need to be vigilant. It's 2 a.m. in the morning, we have to work if we really wish to see ourselves as a very good position in the market. Else, recession is around the corner, and if you continue to have the knowledge which you have right now, and you do not upgrade yourself, you are bound to go. With this, Treasury Consulting, thank you very much. You know that we already have a derivative bot which is Julia. Currently it is under the data feeding phase, and we are expecting that before end of October the data feeding would end up. We are going to having managed service program using Julia. There is a hell lot of action which is happening at Treasury front as well, and we are participating, and we are, according to me, 3 years from now for being a bank, maximum 3 years from now for being a bank, and sooner or later we will file for a banking license in Singapore. We are ready. We are currently devising our front office architecture. We are not far from being a banking entity, and hopefully after 3 years Treasury Consulting will give you a very pleasant news to be a bank in Singapore. Have a good time. Talk soon.